Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 83 of Makai-World Reviews. I am of course the Tony Makai, master of leg drops and big boots. We are at the end of Hulk Hogan month. I made it, you made it, we all somehow endured it through, and unlike Mr. Hogan, I not once dropped the N-bomb. We've seen some stinkers this month, but I've only heard vague rumblings about this one, and it was slightly harder to find than the rest of them, so that gives me some indication of what I'm dealing with. It's called The Ultimate Weapon. So let's go ahead and get into that today. But of course, before we begin, just subscribe. Just do it. I'm the only channel, like I've mentioned this month, that can do Werner Herzog month and Hulk Hogan month back to back. Who else has that range? Who else are you going to get that kind of content from? Come on. The Ultimate Weapon. I wonder how many times I'm going to call it The Ultimate Warrior this episode. We'll see. Directed by John Cassar and John Strong. John Cassar is a fairly middling director, and I mean that in the very best way, having worked on lots of TV like Forever Night, about a vampire cop, which is actually a show I enjoy. Baywatch Nights, about mysteries on the beach. Moving on to work on lots of 24-related stuff. I mean, he shows great consistency in his mediocrity. And the other John, he'd only directed this, having written some Super Friends episodes, along with some stuff from Planet of the Apes, the TV show, which I've seen. He also wrote the episode of Scooby-Doo with Redbeard, which is cool. Not sure any of that qualifies him for directing, though. The show was written by Robert Paul. He wrote this and then was never heard from again. Starring, of course, Hulk Hogan. All the bashing I've done to the Hulkster for his poor wrestling, his racist diatribes, his out-and-out lies, like hanging out with John Belushi in '86 when the man had been dead for 4 years. I have to say he was in China, Illinois, and that show was pretty good. This is the Hulkster's month, and he deserves nothing less than for us to rejoice that he didn't do more movies. And Cynthia Preston had a long career being a bit part in a ton of things. She was the voice of Princess Zelda in the late 80s cartoon, was in the abysmal Total Recall 2070 TV show, and lots of General Hospital. There it is. Release date was October 1998, couldn't find a day given. What came out the same week was a pretty weak month for movies, but there are a few standouts such as Happiness, an incredibly controversial film, but one I enjoyed. It borders on satire in its ridiculousness. It deals with some really heavy subjects, and in a disjointed but entertaining way, if that makes any sense. This is not a film for everybody, or most people for that matter, but is one I actually like. And Vampires, otherwise known as John Carpenter's Vampires. Not a high point for Mr. Carpenter. If you want to see James Woods be a badass and Sheryl Lee get naked in a non-Twin Peaks setting, this is the movie for you. It's fine. It's not totally and completely forgettable. To the movie. We open on an exceptionally dark tone with Cutter, who is the Hulkster, saving a young girl from some vague militia, but she falls off a cliff and dies, presumably. But that was a dream or flashback or something. Cutter lives with his girlfriend, Lori, on a ranch, and he's building a farm. He's also a Special Forces mercenary. And a new job has come in, much to Lori's chagrin. Cutter and his new partner, New Cobra, son of Old Cobra, are going to capture a weapons cache for the UN and a man named Rourke. The job goes quite easily for Cutter and Cobra, but they figure out Rourke isn't with the UN, and he's going to sell the weapons to the IRA. So Cutter blows all the weapons up and some of the people. Blows it all sky high. Cutter and Cobra are told by their boss, Drummond, that they're pretty much out of work after that little snafu. Of course, this leads to the bad guy, McBride, a generically evil rich yuppie who literally has a group called the $1 Million Club. McBride and Rourke go to Drummond to demand to know who put the kibosh on the deal with the IRA, and Drummond says he'll give up his boys for some money at a later date. Cutter then goes looking for his daughter, Mary Kate, who he's not seen for 20 years. After a hilarious mix-up I'll talk about later, he finds her working at a strip club, and despite not being in her life for 20 years, berates her for this. He then beats up her boss and Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who of course is in this. Drummond is killed by the bad guys who find out who Cutter is, and about his daughter. The bad guys hire Mary Kate as an escort for McBride, and also has her roommate killed. He tries to force himself upon her, and she uses some neat on-groin attacks, and escapes. This leads to Mary Kate, her dad, Lori, and Cobra uniting as there is an assassination attempt made on their lives. Cutter goes to confront McBride only to, of course, get captured and tortured. But he escapes, and this leads to the inevitable showdown. All the bad guys are killed, and McBride ends up dead when one of his henchmen run a car into him while he is standing on a trip mine. And the family walk off happy, even though there are like 30 dead guys in the property, and their barn is destroyed. Yeah. Okay, let's start with the man of the month, the Hulkster. This was a strange movie for him. It had both nudity and like really excessive violence. It was clearly not in his wheelhouse, and he seemed out of place. That's not for lack of effort. He did try in this movie, you can tell. He put some effort into being more subdued, less wacky and over the top. Fortunately, he's not a good actor, and he is wacky and over the top. That's just who he is. So his efforts fell totally flat. He didn't have much help from the people around him either, to be honest, and I'll get to all of them. He also had his good buddy Ed Leslie, Brutus Bar Beefcake, in this, of course. Hulk tried, he tried. What might be his best, but yeah, he was not so good as a subdued giant man. Also, why was he kidnapped in this? Why does this happen in every film? He got captured in all the movies save Mr. Nanny, where everyone else was captured. But in this particular, it didn't work, because they capture him, he escapes, then there is the showdown in his ranch, which he arrives at, like, soon. Why do the whole capture-escape part and not just go right to the final act? To pad the runtime? Because that's what it felt like. Not to mention the bad guys have all these weapons, like special weapons. They show him when he's captured that they don't use any of. Among those confusing plot points are a number of others, such as the opening scene. What happened there? Who was that girl? Was that Mary-Kate? Because she's not dead. Or was it just an internal representation of his failures? I don't get it. There's a part where Mary-Kate steals a flash drive from McBride, and they can't get into it, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like, the plot point is largely ignored. It's briefly mentioned, but really adds nothing to the drama. As every one of the bad guys is killed, it doesn't really matter what's on it anyways. So why do that? There's a scene where McBride is sword fighting, not fencing, but like sword fighting with these medieval replica swords, and he's pretty good. There aren't any other sword fighting scenes in the movie, so to what end was this extended training sequence needed? The UN stuff. So Rourke pretended to be a UN guy, but Cutter and Cobra taking a base filled with like American white people, and they found it's an American base. This is never mentioned again. What the hell is actually going on with this military installation? You'd think the U.S. military would be pretty pissed that they got millions of guns stolen or destroyed, but whatever. And McBride is selling it to the IRA. Brother, the U.S. government sold plenty of weapons to the IRA, probably cheaper. The strip club stuff. Now, personal feelings aside, she's an adult, and he's not seen her for 20 years. So he has no right to come into her life and criticize her for anything. He has no idea what she's going through or doing or anything. He just comes in, figures out it's her, then yells at her. It's like, dude, if you want to help her get out of the situation or a lifestyle you don't like, there are many other ways of handling it. It came off as mean-spirited, frankly. Right before that, there's this hilarious scene where Hulk went to what he thought was her apartment, and there's a skinny black guy with a flower painted on him, and Hulk beats him up and then harasses his girlfriend, but like, neither of them are Mary-Kate, and she has almost nothing to do with this situation. It's very strange. The cop car stuff. I didn't mention it, but one of the bad guys steals a cop car earlier in the film, and at the end he appears again and he crashes the car into the barn. And that's what sets off the explosion. It's hilarious. It's a strange callback, as if it were such a brief scene where he steals the cop car. I don't understand why they came back to it. Cobra gets a kind of cool moment. He is grazed by a bullet, but he's playing dead, and when the bad guy comes up to him, he uses a broken car mirror to shoot behind him like he has his gun laying on him. It was kind of badass. Beyond that, everyone was fairly flat, sans Cutter and McBride, and even then their personalities are military guy who is sad and evil rich guy. But that's leagues ahead of Cobra, horny but good shot. Mary-Kate mad at her dad and stripper, and Lori mad at Cutter but won't leave this obviously emotional abusive situation. They're just cardboard cutouts. Sheena Larkin is in this. She was in a few episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark that I remember her from, and was in, she was Mary-Kate's grandma here, I think, and she gave a good performance, but she's only in 2 scenes. I just thought she deserved a shout out. Soundtrack, not bad. It felt very Commando or Terminator, the kind of generic heavy action rock. It worked for the scenes, appropriate through and through, never offensive, and lifted some of the more cringy scenes. So competent and welcome. Overall, this movie felt like something I'd seen on TNT or USA or on like a Wednesday afternoon in the late 90s at 1:15 in the afternoon. With the nudity edited out, of course. It was generic, mostly harmless, and overall totally forgettable. I don't remember anything save Hulk Hogan from this movie in a week. It really wasn't that bad. It really wasn't much of anything, but I've certainly watched worse Hogan films this month. Speaking of bad, something Hogan was doing the same month the movie came out was at WCW's Halloween Havoc 1998, where he had his long-awaited WrestleMania 6 rematch against the Ultimate Warrior. Now, 8 years later, no one but Hogan really cared about this, and the Warrior was a mess, personally and professionally. It was an abysmal thing that happened. It didn't just happen. It happened to us without our consent. Yeah. So recommend the Ultimate Weapon? No. Nothing else really to say. Well, that was the last week of Hulk Hogan month. Which of these movies did you enjoy hearing about the most? Let me know down below. Also, add me on Instagram under Demon Peaks for daily Twin Peaks memes. Subscribe. And of course, check out my podcast, the Dark Peaks Podcast. I also overhauled my Patreon. I made the tiers make more sense. I had pictures. So check that out. See if you like. $1 will go a long way. Next week, I'm doing all requests next month. I'd love to hear if you have more, because I'd like to do more than just a month. But here they are. The first request I have up on the rocks is Velvet Goldmine. So come back for that. This is Benito Makaya, Master of Minds and Men. Thank you very much, and goodbye.